It's Mom again, and this is the 8th night of Hanukkah. As you can see, 8 candles, 8 nights. Tonight's story for Kayla, Alyssa, Stephen, Jonathan, and Tori, and anyone else who wishes to watch, is A Great Miracle Happened There, a Hanukkah story by Carla Kuskin, illustrated by Robert Andrew Parker, and the illustrations are beautiful. So we're going to start partway in the book. And there's the first picture. Long ago, in the distant past, there was a king named Antiochus Epiphanes who was very powerful, but he was neither wise nor good. Antiochus ruled many lands, and one of those was the land of Israel. Jerusalem was a city in Israel then, as it is today, and the events that we celebrate at Hanukkah took place in that long-ago Jerusalem and the rough countryside around it. Because the king ruled over many different lands, he ruled many different peoples. They dressed in different ways, spoke different languages, and followed different customs. When they prayed to different gods, but the king did not care about the different ways and wishes of his people. He followed Greek ways, so he made laws that said that everyone he ruled must wear a Greek dress, follow Greek customs, and pray in Greek temples to Greek gods. "Do as I say or die," said Antiochus. The troops of Antiochus marched into the beautiful temple the Jews had built in Jerusalem. They destroyed the holy scrolls and books and took the temple's treasures. They scraped the gold from the temple walls. Then they made a Greek temple of the place. "Pray as I pray," said Antiochus, "or die." Many people were very frightened, so they obeyed the new laws. But there were some who were willing to fight and die for their beliefs. Not far from Jerusalem, in the city of Modin, there was a Jewish priest named Mattathias. He refused to follow the king's laws. When soldiers were sent to force the people to obey, Mattathias was so angry that he killed a Jewish man who did obey the soldiers. Then he killed the soldier. After Mattathias had killed the 2 men, he pulled down the altar in the temple in Modin. Then he cried out that everyone who believed, as he did, should follow him. Of course he knew that if he did not run away, he too would be killed. Many people who also hated the terrible laws followed him. Women, men, and children took their cattle and left their homes to live in the rough hills outside that city. Mattathias and his wife took their 5 sons. Their names were Johanan, Gaddis, Simeon, Simeon, Basis, Judah Maccabee, Eleazar, Avraham, and Jonathan Apphus. I hope I'm pronouncing those correctly. I'm sure I butchered the names. Simeon was the wisest son, and Judah was the strongest. When Mattathias died, Judah became the leader of all the Jewish warriors in the hills. They called themselves Maccabees after him. Maccabee means hammer in Hebrew, and these warriors hammered at their enemies in many battles. Their fame spread. Their lives were very hard. Sometimes they did not have enough food. Often they slept on the cold ground, but they were determined to win back the temple in Jerusalem, so they fought on. King Antiochus knew of their strength and their success, so he put an enormous army together to stop them. Then Judah said to his men, "Be valiant." This means to be brave and strong. They were, and after many, many battles, they took back the great temple on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. Now that should have been a most wonderful time for the Maccabees. They were returning to the place they loved most in the world after long, difficult years. But the handsome gates had been burned. Rooms and altars were broken down, and there were weeds and rocks everywhere. Everything that had been neat, green, shining, and lovely was destroyed and desolate. They went to work, building, cleaning, and making the place beautiful again. Then, when the temple was all ready, the priests blessed it and everything that was in it. All this happened on the 25th of Kislev in 164 BC. It is called the rededication of the temple. That means that the temple was made holy again and given back to the God of the Jews. Then those who were there lit the menorah and gave thanks and prayed. And now, more than 2,000 years later, we still light the Hanukkah candles and pray in the same way. There's also a story that when the soldiers entered the temple court, they found 8 tall spears lying on the ground where they had been hurled. They took the spears and drove them standing straight up into the earth. Then they lit a flame at the top of each one, making the spears look like a candelabra, like the menorah. As long as the Jewish people can remember, it has been very important to always have a flame burning in the temple. This is called the eternal flame. Eternal means lasting forever. In those long ago days, the menorah had 7 wicks dipped in oil. But when the Maccabees looked for oil to relight the flames, they found that there was only a tiny bit they could use. Most of it had been spoiled by Antiochus soldiers. There was only enough good oil left to last for a single day, so the Maccabees were very worried. They were sure the flame would go out because they knew it would take them at least a week to get new oil. But amazingly, that tiny bit of oil lasted for 8 days, and the flame kept burning. On the 8th day, the good new oil was brought to the temple. And that is why Hanukkah menorahs have places for 8 candles and the Shemos. It is why we light a candle every night for 8 nights, beginning on the 25th of Kislev, the day of the rededication. And that is the story of the Maccabees and Hanukkah. Now we'll only do a couple of trivia questions, and I think we are on question number 21. So, 21. The Syrians had the latest weapons, of course they did. Ballistas for throwing stones, battering rams, javelins, spears, swords, bows, and metal armor. What were the weapons used by the Maccabees? A. Sticks and stones. B. The jaws of an ass. C. Knives and swords. Or D. Tiny drink umbrellas.
It's either A or C.
It's A or C. It is A. Sticks and stones. The sticks and stones were bound into maces, shepherds' slingshots, and farm implements. Bunch of fighting farmers. 22. Judas and his men recaptured the temple at Jerusalem, cleansed it, and rededicated it on the 25th day of the Hebrew month of Kislev. When did Antiochus defile it? I can't turn the page. Oh, it's very, very hard. Oh, look, there's no choices. We just have to say, when did he defile it?
What year? Did it say the year in that book?
It did. The 25th of Kislev, exactly 3 years earlier. Okay. So, we'll do one more question. What did Judas put a wreath on the front door of the temple? Why did Judas put a wreath on the front door of the temple for its rededication? A. The first temple had a wreath on its door. B. He got a good buy at Kmart after Christmas sale. C. It had to do with Hellenism and Sukkot. Or D. The wreath was a symbol of peace.
D?
Right, C. Very good. It had to do with Hellenism and Sukkot. According to 1 Maccabees, when Judas and his followers rededicated the temple, they decked the front of the temple with crowns of gold and small shields. Crowns in that period were wreaths. They put the wreath around their heads. Hellenistic symbols of victory, which attested to the Hellenistic influence during that century. Judas also put a wreath on the front door of the temple because Hanukkah originally was celebrated as a second Sukkot, a fall harvest festival when participants often donned leafy wreaths. So isn't that interesting? Wreaths on the door at Hanukkah. Okay, so those are our 2 stories for this evening, and that's it for this year. A great miracle happened there because it did, and some fun Hanukkah trivia. So that's it.